Hi, I'm Dan Costa, the Chief Content Officer at Worth Media Group, and I am here in Los Angeles at the Milken Institute Global Conference 2026. I am joined by Brian Kreiter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Braidwell. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So we just met today for the first time. We've been chatting for the last hour. There are a ton of topics I want to talk about. But first, let me just say, most people may not have heard of Braidwell. What does the company do and what's your approach?
So Braidwell is a investment firm and an innovation platform. We essentially back or build medicines and health solutions. So we started in 2021 and really with the idea that we could bring together great scientists, biostatisticians, together with great investors, company builders, and really try and figure out what are the most important medicines that are going to impact human health over the next decades and invest behind those. And then also look at what medicines should exist but don't, and then build the capability to actually make those medicines come to be.
So why is this not the purview of like a giant pharmaceutical company? Like, why is it somebody like that doing this business?
Yeah, I think the giant pharmaceutical companies, so to speak, are super important to the ecosystem and have been so and continue to create and build great drugs and market those drugs. I think that the innovation engine over the last several decades has really evolved such that, small biotech companies like the ones we tend to invest behind or the ones we create end up being part of really kind of the feedstock for that innovation engine. It's really not too dissimilar from what you might see in the media world where, independent films are made all over the place and ultimately might go to other distributors. I think the interesting thing is right now we're looking at an industry where there's a ton of disruption going on up and down in terms of both what's happening at the really early stage of medicine. And so over the last year, you've seen more and more breakthrough science come out of China. And so the types of innovation that typically might have only happened in the West, you're starting to see happen there and those pharmas buy them. And then at the other end of the spectrum, where you might have really needed a pharma to distribute a drug, you're seeing the rise of direct-to-consumer pharmaceuticals. GLP-1 has been game-changing in terms of the industry. And so I think we're at a moment where we see a lot of change through that whole value chain.
I also think it's interesting that you're investing in both drug development and technology and hardware and diagnostic tools. Like that seems like a fairly unusual mix.
I think what we look at is we start with, can we get a broad understanding of the major diseases, the major health challenges that impact us across the board? And then can we have a sense of what are the key technologies, be those therapeutics, be those devices that impact those technology, that impact those diseases. And so the companies that make devices and diagnostics are a little bit different generally than the companies that make therapeutics from a portfolio perspective in our public-private fund. Though we think those go together quite well and create a return stream that we really like, but also just helps us have a very complete view of what's going on. There's some incredible things happening in the diagnostics world right now. You're going to see increasing amount of blood-based tests for cancer coming through, which will become standard part of care, which we think is super important and really exciting. There are cancers that are detectable that right now aren't detected because people don't have the exams that they need to for lots of reasons. We think anytime we have a avoidable health problem or we can solve that with technology, we can make that technology accessible and affordable to folks, is super exciting to us.
So what are some of the bets that you placed? What are some examples of companies or technologies that you've invested in?
Yeah, we really invested across a number of different areas from, like I said, blood-based diagnostics, companies like Guardant Health that has really been a leader in the fight against colorectal cancer. We've looked at companies that are in oncology, companies that are working for drugs in the immune system. Really across the board, we've been really excited about what's happening in the world of chronic disease. There are some incredible medicines available now that can help us avoid having heart attacks, can help us avoid having metabolic disease. One of the things that we are particularly interested in is the idea of adherence, of drug adherence. So one of the really interesting tragedies is despite having these great drugs, oftentimes people don't stay on them. People don't take them either because of cost or access, sometimes just habits. You and I are great generally at those type of habits. So we're really interested in opportunities to invest in medicines They could have longer acting duration where it's easier for patients to stay on that drug. I think there's a opportunity in general in our space. In general, medicine has not been something like, unlike the technology world, where you've spent a lot of time, where things have really been designed in many ways from the best companies, really consumer back. What is the consumer experience?
Yeah.
How do we solve that? Medicine isn't like that. Medicine's a terrible consumer experience typically, right? And so we're seeing some change in that in terms of how people get information about their health, how they understand what medicines are available, how they interact with the medical system, ultimately how they're going to actually get access to those drugs. And so I think that's...
We've done a couple of interviews with people about the healthcare industry, and the consumerification of healthcare is talked about a lot of times in a relatively derogatory way. But I mean, in order to design products, you have to know how your customers are using them. And the adherence problem is a great example of these drugs could be very effective, but if people aren't using them for whatever reason, even if they're just lazy and the consequences are terrible, that is not a well-designed product. And that's not the way the medical industry has been constructed.
It's really interesting. If you look at a drug like GLP-1, it's this is an amazing medicine. I mean, not only what has it done for diabetes and what it's done for obesity, but it looks like this is going to have really positive impacts across a number of different issues. Addiction, it's potentially neuroprotective. We'll see. We're going to get a lot more data over time. But when we look at the stats on this and how long someone stays on it, this is a drug that somebody's supposed to be on for the rest of their life. And when we study the data, we know that that's not happening. And so it's a critical topic to look at and try and figure out if you really are, at the end of the day, invest in how do we change the curve? How do we really change health outcomes over the long term for the broadest group of people, which is something that's really important to us.
It is interesting. It seems to me that the company is constructed with a couple of different interest groups. One of them being, researchers who are doing the medical evaluation, studying the data, doing the science. And then you've got sort of a business contingent that's how do we turn this product into something that we can sell, we can scale? How do we bring it to market? How do we, it's marrying those two things, which oftentimes are not connected at all in a lot of companies.
Yeah, we really think about it in three different areas. So one is we need to really understand science. We need to understand whether a scientific breakthrough is going to work or fail and how we can prove that to be true. We then also have to understand what the size of the patient population is for that. And that's really what that is. How are doctors going to behave? What is prescriber behavior going to look like? How is payment going to work? And the third thing we look at is finance, which is how is the investment around that going to work? How is that drug going to get financed, or the development of that going to be financed over time? How is the launch of that going to be financed? And so we end up having teams that are focused on each of those. Increasingly, like everyone else, we're putting a huge foot into the world of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Our background, I came from Bridgewater Associates and really came from a technology and systems orientation. We've been being able to apply that to that world of bringing together science and commercial analysis and financial analysis. We think offers some incredible opportunity to really understand in different ways, in better ways, in compounded ways, what medicines are likely going to work, and even what medicines should exist and don't.
It's pretty sure you explained that the company's almost turning into an AI research company, even though that wasn't necessarily part of your initial.
It's in some ways, right? You look at the same. I don't know how you can't, which is just the capabilities that are available to us now, and so we have major projects looking at how we apply AI to our full investment process. We are investing on the front edge, we believe, of companies that are creating the tools and strategies for drug development. So using agentic models to design and run experiments, using automation to run laboratories. We think this is an incredibly powerful opportunity to reduce the cost and speed the time. There's a phrase that one of our portfolio companies, Lila Sciences, uses, which is they're in the pursuit of scientific superintelligence.
Mm-hmm.
We think that is so powerful, and the opportunity for AI to hit the physical world, we think, is just tremendous.
You were saying that developing drugs is one of the hardest things. You were saying the hardest thing humans can do.
I heard one of the most interesting things about this conference is, and particularly given the history of the Milken organization, there's so many healthcare leaders here, which is why I was so excited to be here. someone who runs a pharma company said last night at an event I was at. He said, the idea of figuring out a biological target to hit and how to hit that in order to defeat disease is truly an incredible human challenge or a human achievement. One of the things that's amazing is as much as we understand about biology, we're really at the very beginning. There's so much we don't understand. And so that creates opportunity, that creates a lot of challenge, that creates a different dynamic with respect to applying AI to our space than perhaps some other spaces. It's one of the reasons we're really excited about situations where AI is being very much connected to the idea of creating new data and getting new data at scale. I think what we know about bio today is a fraction of hopefully what we will know a decade from now. And I think that's going to create a lot of possibility for you.
That's great. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this week. It's a very busy week, but I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
I'm Dan Costa at Worth Media. You can find more stories like this on worth.com or check us out on YouTube.